Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Arab Manila's COP27 event. My name is Lynn De Mayuga, Energy Business Leader of Arab's Manila office. I will be your host and
So we're
moderator
starting.
for
It's a full
today's
house
affair.
with guests.
To recap,
Yay!
our COP27 series was kicked off last Monday, October 31st, with the theme, Building a Climate Resilient Asia. This was succeeded by events in our Vietnam and Hong Kong offices the next day, in November 1, with topics about flood management and city resilience. On November 2, our Indonesia office touched on the crucial role of inclusive design for community resilience. Followed yesterday by our Malaysia and Singapore offices for the topics on transport strategies for mobility resilience and hydrogen as a potential resilient energy carrier. And to close the series, today here in our Manila office, we will tackle how to ensure energy resilience for the economies of the future. To grace this occasion, we are honored to be indulged by speakers from the British Embassy Manila, Oxfam Pilipinas, the Department of Energy of the Philippines, Aboitiz Power Corporation, and of course, our very own East Asia Energy Business Leader. At the end of their presentations, our speakers will be invited to come back on stage for a panel discussion, where our audiences will be given a chance to engage, raise their questions, and pick the brains of our esteemed guests. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you for our welcoming remarks one of Arab's directors. He's a director of Arab who has over 30 years' experience in the field of project management, site formation, ground and project risks, underground space, geotechnical design, engineering geology, and tunneling-related work. He has carried out complex project management on various infrastructure projects from large-scale MTR and HK government projects, major ADB infrastructure projects, to smaller local private and regional scale projects and studies. He has led teams of specialists in civil engineering, tunneling, cavern engineering, engineering geology, hydrology, geographic information systems, economics, environmental and geotechnical work for the majority of the specialist input and deliverables in Hong Kong, the Philippines, South Korea, Vietnam, Australia, Singapore, and other East Asia locations. He has led and developed the tunneling and engineering geology teams in Hong Kong office and currently provides overall guidance and support to the teams for various tunneling, engineering, and geology-related input. Let's give a round of applause for Mr. Mark Wallace.
Good morning, everybody. We're pleased to open the last session in our Race to Resilience series this week. Today, we are going to ponder the question, how do we ensure energy resilience for the economies of the future? And we will hear from a broad spectrum of guest speakers and energy experts on how we think the future will become more resilient and balanced to meet the demands of society and our planetary boundaries. I would personally like to welcome our distinguished guests, Mr. Alistair White, the Deputy Head of the British Embassy Mission to the Philippines, and our other guest speakers, Director Michael Sina Cruz from the Energy Policy and Planning Bureau of the Philippine Department of Energy, as well as Joel Chester Pagulayan, an Advocacy Officer on Climate Change and Energy Transition from Oxfam. And then also Roland Vergara, the Vice President of Renewable Energy Project Development and Land Acquisitions and Conversion of Aboitiz Power in the Philippines, as well as my colleagues from Arab and Lynn hosting this in Manila. I'd also like to welcome everyone online, as well as distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen in office in Manila. So as Lynn said, my name is Mark Wallace. I'm the infrastructure business leader in the Philippines. I'm not an energy specialist, as she mentioned, but an energy user, the same as most of us here today, So I'm looking forward to hearing about how we're going to be more energy resilient in the future. So as a bit of a background, when the UN SDGs came out in 2015, Arup were already acting on many of the principles set out in the Charter. Indeed, we were already focused at balancing the needs of society with the ecological age and trying to achieve beneficial outcomes for the planet. We formalized our approach to really address the SDGs in 2019 and decided in 2020 to set out internal business targets to be net zero by 2030. So this is a tough thing for us to do, but we are focused on this journey to get this to work for our business. We made further commitments in 2021 and we're a co-signatory to the Global Hydrogen Charter, and I've been improving our skills and knowledge on implementation of hydrogen technologies across the globe. In COP26, Arup made further commitments as a firm to strengthen our internal networks, to brief our clients and embed whole life cycle carbon assessments, as well as consider circular economy principles in our buildings business and other businesses wherever we can. We also made a commitment to not pursue any more new energy commissions that involve hydrocarbon-based fuels. So today we're going to focus on really these three SDGs. All are linked and focused at our modern way of living and at turning around our reliance on fossil fuels. Access to energy for our global population has slowed in recent years to around 730 million. Not having any access to energy and not much change is expected by 2030. So about 1 in 10 of the world's population still doesn't have access to electricity. Our cities need to accommodate more people with greater demands on electricity, especially for the poor and disadvantaged. And our demand on natural resources consumption has increased by 65% over the last 20 years. So with energy contributing a sizable input in providing those demands. So climate change, as we know, is truly upon us, and the threats come from a variety of sources that are increasing in intensity and frequency. Some studies suggest that up to 67% of these incidents, the threats that are related to to our electricity supply, are weather-related threats. And these, as we know, are increasing, along with the warming of the planet and accelerating climate change. So there's a balance between the threats of climate change and the conditions and state of the electrical systems that we have. Here you can see the trends in the US electricity outages, and you can see that this trend this is a growing trend as climate change and weather intensities increase. And as the existing infrastructure ages and becomes more fragile, we have these increased impacts on, as a result of climate change on our more fragile networks. So embedding resilience into the networks is the key to understanding the threat, impacts, and what mitigation is needed to reduce failovers and disruption. It's also about embedding redundancy, alternatives, and options in the systems to deal with threats, learning lessons, improving our networks, response times, and overall reliability. Here are a few examples of how climate change is impacting our existing systems, from reduced rainfall to increased temperatures and wildfire threats. Of course, there are opportunities as well, with some regions and areas getting more wind and rain, but overall, the increase in temperature is an ever-present threat to our electrical systems all over the world, and especially so in Asia. So with that doomsday message, maybe, I would again like to thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you will enjoy the energy resilience session. And for those in the Manila office, I hope that you enjoy your lunch afterwards. Thank you. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Mark, for a very insightful welcoming remarks. And now to officially open today's event, let's all give a warm round of applause to our honorable guest from the British Embassy of Manila, the Deputy Head of Mission in the Philippines, Mr. Alistair White.
Thank you very much. I think it's better if I do use a microphone rather than shout. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's an absolute pleasure to be here at such an exciting event, at such a brilliant venue as well, so thank you. And for the opportunity to give these opening remarks for today's Race to Resilience Asia events by Arup. And it's great to be here with Arup. I think I've had the honour of working, or the pleasure of working with Arup several times during my career. And I think it's just a great example of British engineering expertise. And to listen to the presentation I've just heard, just really committed to our shared, like-minded organisations and together to address our climate challenges. All of us here, of course, we know that climate change isn't a myth. Climate change is real, and we're grateful for partners like Arup, the Asian Development Bank, like-minded UK and Philippines companies that take on the challenge to undertake net zero initiatives and similarly support the industry to accelerate its energy transition. And the UK has been a long-time advocate of clean growth, and it was able to build a wealth of climate-resilient, sustainable and inclusive infrastructure solutions that can support urban-specific issues applicable to other countries, of course, such as here in the Philippines. And clean growth represents and reflects the ambition of the UK government's comprehensive 10-point plan for the UK to invest in the development and implementation of clean technologies. In support of this, while UK businesses are already exporting their innovative, world-leading products and services onto the global stage, we also have the UK Export Finance, on the other hand, working with businesses to help grow green industries and build resilient supply chains. The power sector, we know, accounts for a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions, and coal is the single biggest contributor to human-created climate change. To meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, the global transition to clean power needs to progress 4 to 6 times faster than it is currently, and global coal emissions need to fall by 80% this decade to keep on track to 1.5 degrees. An accelerated and more ambitious shift to clean energy, including increased solar, wind deployment and greater energy efficiency, provides the most effective route to ensuring climate and energy security and, alongside that, long-term prosperity. And renewables are the fastest and cheapest route to strengthening energy security. Their cost continues to fall rapidly, unaffected by the fossil fuel market volatility, and transforming energy options, providing new local job opportunities, energy access, and cutting the cost of living. In the UK, we've already taken these important steps in the last decade. We've tripled our renewable energy generation and started the move away from coal, indeed with a full phase-out in 2024 for coal-powered energy. And with the end of our COP presidency, the UK will continue to accelerate the pace of international transition to clean energy. We will do this by strengthening international support in developing economies in their transition, including those most vulnerable to climate change, and demonstrating the power of collaboration through key initiatives such as the Energy Transition Council. And with that said, the UK and the British Embassy in Manila will remain committed to its clean growth agenda and collaborate with industry partners in support of this shared agenda. And I look forward today hearing the expertise from our honourable guests, people who will be leading this transition in the Philippines in the future, and to hear all of the contributions for everybody here. So thank you again for inviting us and the British Embassy to be here. It's an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. It is our pleasure and, of course, a privilege to have you with us today. Our first presenter is the East Asia Energy Business Leader and Infrastructure Director for Arup. Based in Hong Kong, he has over 34 years of experience in the management, design, and implementation of major energy infrastructure projects. Across a number of Asian countries to facilitate the transition toward cleaner forms of energy and generation and reductions in demand through the implementation of energy-efficient solutions. This work follows the governing strategy within Arup to build a sustainable future through the implementation of carbon reduction technologies and practices by working alongside investors, developers, and lenders to provide both technical and commercial advisory services for energy assets across Asia. In his presentation, he will guide us through implementation of energy resilience framework. Let's all welcome Mr. Peter Thompson.
Hi, good morning, everybody. As Lynn said, my name is Peter Thompson. I'm the East Asia Energy Business Leader for Arups based in Hong Kong. And I'd like to talk to you today about the implementation of an energy resilience framework. It's going to be quite a fast run through. There's obviously a lot to cover. But I'll try and do that as efficiently as I can. So first of all, what is resilience? So it's basically, there's a number of different definitions given by different organizations as to what it means. But really it's about the ability of a complex system to survive, adapt and thrive when exposed to different stresses and shocks to the system. It's probably the best definition I can give. It's really about how that complex system can function when faced with these sort of disruptive circumstances. And there's been a number of sort of examples over time of where resilience hasn't been built into a system, and we'll talk about maybe the Russian situation at the end of the presentation, but there's a few examples here in Australia where they've experienced blackouts during storms. In America, there were power cuts, leaving sort of many customers without power for many hours during the day. There's situations in Wales when there was, again, major power cuts due to power outages. And then also in Taiwan, blackouts due to issues with their gas-fired power stations. And then lastly, we've got another situation here in Jakarta with the smarter grid and such like. And many of these sort of shocks and stresses that we're talking about aren't just really weather related, but that's obviously a big part. It can be due to sort of aging and deteriorating assets. It can be geopolitical uncertainty. It could be due to population growth or even human error, or sort of physical and cybersecurity threats. It actually comes from quite a number of different areas, and it's something that needs to be considered holistically when thinking of a complex energy system. It's really about how you respond to these shocks and how you respond to these stresses to the system. It's also how you can recover or withstand some of these shocks and stresses, and then how you recover afterwards, particularly when we consider things like extreme events, which are sort of becoming more and more prevalent these days. What does it really achieve? I mean, it's really about the ability to change and transform systems in order to cater with the changing environment. So these are the sort of key drivers, if you like, towards realizing a resilience framework. And in terms of the sort of things you look at, most people think of it as being the physical assets, and that's obviously an important part, but it's more than that. It's really the infrastructure, the networking, the ecosystems that feed into that power asset. It's the organization or the organizational structures that govern those practices, and then also the places, where these assets are located, what the neighborhoods are like, and the communities, and they're sort of nested systems that all sort of work together as one complex system that needs to be addressed as a whole. So what are the qualities of a resilient system? And there's a number of different sort of areas that we consider when we look at these types of systems. First of all, it's to be reflective. It's the ability to learn from what we know, learn from others, from how they've responded. We need to be resourceful. We need to be able to act when we see issues that are potentially going to occur. We need to build in robustness and redundancy and flexibility into the system so we can withstand those shocks and stresses that can occur, and then identify and develop different strategies to facilitate the recovery. We also need to be inclusive and integrated, so we need to plan and take into account the interdependencies and promote a coordinated action. We also work alongside other organizations, in particular the Resilience Shift, and they're an organization that are particularly focused on resilience, not just in energy, but across the board in a number of areas. And it's developing their processes through influencing policy in governments. Is about shaping the practice of how we do infrastructure design works, as well as policy making, and then sharing and learning some of those lessons that we've learned from other areas and implementing them in new geographies. So it's really as well looking at the geographical context. It's about interviewing with the experts, understanding what the problems are, how to guard against them, so realizing what the challenges are, and then having roundtable discussions to develop ways and means of building resilience into that system. Now in ARUPS we've actually developed a resilience framework. It's a fairly simple tool. It's essentially comprises 3 main dimensions. It has 11 goals and 66 indicators within those goals. We've given a QR code at the bottom if you're interested to download this. You can see how we go about looking at these complex systems, rationalizing each of those different indicators to understand exactly where the strengths and weaknesses of a system exists. So we just talked very briefly about this framework. The first dimension is really looking at the leadership and strategy of an organization or company that's operating the particular assets. The next dimension is looking at the economy and the society that rely on those assets and how they interact with the system. And then lastly, we look at the infrastructure and the ecosystems that again sort of interact and feed into that distributed system. And then beyond that, we have 11 goals. So within each of those different dimensions, we have 3 or 4 different goals, and these are sort of based on technical, financial, or organizational or social aspects. And they essentially guide us towards the 66 indicators. So within each of those goals, we have 3 or 4 again, different indicators. And we've got an example here of one in understanding the infrastructure criticality. So we're looking at the interdependence of the system to understand the internal and external interdependencies between systems and their physical and sort of non-physical interfaces to identify whether there are any gaps or weaknesses or areas where resilience or lack of resilience could occur within that particular system. And this is the sort of complete diagram that one would use for that. And the idea is that you would give a scoring to each of those attributes based on their relative strengths and weaknesses. And then from that, we can draw that sort of spider web diagram in the middle. Obviously, where the spider web is large, there's obviously a strength in terms of resilience. And where the scoring is low, then obviously there's areas of improvement that we can need to focus on. And then from that, we can develop a series of key initiatives or action plans to try and bridge those gaps in order to develop a resilience framework. We can similarly plot those results on a graph, really showing the sort of probability and the impact of different scenarios and shocks and stresses on the system. Some examples here are things like cyber attack, things like accelerating rate of change, as well as peakiness in demand, are all sort of typical factors that one might see in an energy system. In terms of the initiatives and solutions, there's a whole range of different concepts that one can put forward, and it really depends on the nature of the resilience or resilience gap that's been identified. But it can range from sort of technical solutions to management solutions, as well as digital solutions. It's something that's really gaining a lot of popularity. Something we are focusing on in ARUPS is developing our digital tools. We think it's the future. It's the way of managing and understanding big data, and something that we think can help in this regard to build in resilience. And then just to conclude, a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but just really to look at the lessons learned in Russia. You know, if you looked at the situation with Germany 5 years ago, they committed to decommission their nuclear power plants. They were fully reliant on Russia for their gas. They were almost 60% reliant on receiving gas from Russia. There was never any perception of any problem coming up, so it's something that was considered to be a safe option. But really, hindsight can show us now that there was a lack of resilience in the system. You can see how gas prices have risen, how there's obviously the issues with renewables costing and increasing as a consequence of these increase in gas prices, and that's really caused a few stresses in Europe in particular. And therefore, there's been a number of strategies put forward. Probably a bit too late, it's something that's being developed after the fact, but really it's looking at how Europe can recover from this situation if they were to not receive gas from Russia. There's obviously quite a few issues with that. There isn't enough LNG from other regions to bridge the gap, so there will be gas shortages this winter. There are measures being put in place, emergency measures to reduce the amount of gas that's required, and also developing sort of storage facilities to get them through the sort of medium to long term situation that this is likely to incur. And then just with the 10-point plan has been obviously put together to cater for this. And I've given an example here. I won't go through all of them, but maybe the key ones are really the first four. So it's basically no new gas supply contracts with Russia, to replace the Russian supplies with alternative sources, to introduce minimum gas storage obligations to enhance market resilience, and to accelerate the deployment of new wind and solar projects. So it's really, a question of this coming a little bit too late. It really should have been considered much earlier. There should have been consideration as to the resilience of the European energy market, and this is something I think we can all learn from. We can all look at our own energy portfolio and understand where the weaknesses might exist, where we might be able to bridge those gaps, and how we might be able to improve our overall resilience as a country. I think the Philippines is one of the more diverse regions. I think you've got gas as well as coal, as well as renewables and hydro and the like. So the mix of fuel is good, but I think there's still other areas where I think there could be some benefit in doing some resilience assessment to understand exactly where the weaknesses may lie, and how we may change or modify the situation to improve that reliance and resilience for this country. So that's a quick whistle-stop tour from me of how we go about looking at energy resilience, and I'll be happy to take questions at the end. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Peter. I'd rather not think that we're late, but rather behind, so we can all catch up on the preparation for resilience. Our next presenter is a queer climate activist, development communicator, licensed environmental planner, and gender justice advocate. He is the advocacy officer for climate change and energy transition of Oxfam Pilipinas. He has been involved in project management, research and development, and science communication in the fields of agriculture, climate science and finance, low carbon development, just transition, and among others. To tell us more about local community engagement for energy resilience, let's all welcome Joel Chester Chang Pagulayan.
Okay, is this working? Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much again for inviting Oxfam Pilipinas. Oxfam is an international humanitarian and development organization. We are a feminist organization, so we put forward women's rights at the heart of our operation. So, today I'll share what we're doing with our local partners in Eastern Samar with CCAT, which is Sentro para sa Ikauunlad ng Katutubong Agham at Teknolohiya. CCAT is a local organization working with coastal communities in the Philippines, and our work with them on just energy transition in small island communities in Eastern Samar is one of our pilot initiatives to put forward energy resilience in the country. And of course, we'll learn later on about our work on decentralizing energy systems. But I believe that some of our colleagues here are also working on modernizing the grid, but our focus is more on decentralizing energy systems and putting more putting the stake of stakeholders in the communities more to highlight their stake in the energy system and energy resilience. So this is the island of Hilabaan in Eastern Samar. Their island is, when we started our work at Oxfam in Eastern Samar, their community is not connected to the grid, to the main Visayas grid. So, but when we started working with the community, the local electric cooperative is also putting up their genset-powered microgrid. So, the context of the island is that they have low to no access to electricity. The current service of the electric cooperative only provides them 8 hours of power from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. And it also affects the community members' economic productivity as well as the children's educational needs, especially with our current situation of the pandemic that requires them to access digital technologies. And then, of course, the compounded burden on women and girls, especially with their unpaid care and domestic work. It also affects how they work in their households. And then, of course, the continuous rise of fuel costs, which was also given a brief background of Peter earlier. And of course, with the rising cost of electricity bills, with all other compounding crises we're having right now, the pandemic, the ration war, and other factors. So as an approach, Oxfam has been working for energy justice, which is anchored to our work on transitional justice. And our approach of empowering women, community leaders, to manage alternative renewable energy power source, addressing their unpaid care and domestic work, and promoting energy democracy and partnership with RE developers are all input into our work on increasing, in promoting procedural justice, meaning all the community members have a stake in decision making in terms of their power and energy systems. Recognition-based justice, recognizing that the community members have their own problems, and one of the solutions is increasing their access to sustainable energy sources. And then, of course, distributive justice on increasing their power access. And some of our key interventions, of course, technology is one key aspect of the transition, but more importantly, social preparation, community engagement really does a lot of work, especially with island communities, capacitating the women, the fisher folk in the community to create a sense of ownership in terms of their energy systems, and at the same time, reintegrating renewable energy in terms of disaster risk reduction and management. If you're familiar with Eastern Samar, it's located in the eastern, in the east coast of the Philippines, and usually we call them the welcoming party of the typhoons in the Philippines. So they're really, really vulnerable in terms of disasters. So integrating, renewable energy technologies in disaster risk reduction is very important to them. And then, of course, some of the outcomes that we've had for the community now, the local RE facility is managed by a women's association. The full ownership is with them. It's not with the local government. It's not with the local electric cooperative, but they work with these institutions already. And then, of course, this year also, some of the local villages, or the barangays as we call them, are also interested in integrating renewable energy technologies in their own jurisdictions. So they had different learning visits in the island to know how the system works, or how the Women's Association manages it. And the women self-help group members, as we call them, they are single parents and women and housewives. They also are part of that Women's Association, and they develop household DRR plans that are anchored in our commitment to reduce and redistribute care work responsibilities, which somehow was reduced because of their increased access to renewable energy sources. And of course, now the students are also part and involved in the management of the local renewable energy systems. And of course, with these initiatives, we encountered some challenges, of course, with the limited local knowledge on renewable energy. But to note that the community is not, the concept of renewable energy is not alien to the community. They've been using solar-powered devices, but other than solar, they are not aware of other renewable energy sources, and that's an entry point for us to campaign more on renewable energy and introducing other technologies that are that might be appropriate for their community. Of course, with the high demand of electricity in the island, it also causes a lot of illegal practices in the communities, but with proper community engagement and proper community dialogues, these practices are being addressed immediately by the Women Association. And then exposure, of course, to typhoon. But our partner, our developer, was able to integrate resilient infrastructures, underground distribution lines to also reduce the risk of the facility being destroyed by storms and typhoons. And some of the best practices, we already trained the local community in managing their RE facility with typhoon resilient infrastructures, and of course a management body to maintain that facility. And some of the opportunities, of course, is what we're also doing with ARUP right now through the Global Challenge Program is increasing our infrastructures, either by engaging other stakeholders, and of course with integrating it with local government units through their budgets and plans, promoting decentralized RE model systems in island villages, expanding women's economic empowerment through renewable energy, and of course with other capacity building initiatives for women, and promoting energy democracy through people and ecology-centered planning and budgeting. So this is a video of our mini documentary that we produced in the island of Hilabaan, and this is just a trailer it's a trailer of the full we can see how it was able to adapt to these new technologies and what we're doing at their livelihoods, their ways of work. So we produced this during Earth Day in this year, but also you can view the full mini documentary on our YouTube channel. You can scan the QR code here, but also it has subtitles for our non-Filipino friends here who can view also the mini documentary. And that's all for my presentation, and you can visit Oxfam Filipinas website and learn more about our work on gender justice, on just transition, and other things that we're working. Thank you, and good morning.
Okay, since we started the partnership from the GB office or the UK office, and now in the Philippines, we're exploring opportunities to work with Oxfam on, as Cheng has mentioned, the global challenge and other community engagement opportunities from our internal Arab office. We cannot talk about enabling energy transition in a local setting without inviting a representative from our national government. Our next speaker is currently the OIC Director for the Energy Policy and Planning Bureau of the Department of Energy. He supervises the formulation and updating of the Philippine Energy Plan and regional or provincial energy plans and programs for major islands and provinces, including the energy demand and supply outlook. He likewise oversees the conduct of policy research and studies and the international cooperation undertakings of the department and on matters relating to climate change and energy resilience. Join me in welcoming Director Michael Sino Cruz.
Okay, thank you, and good morning to everyone. First, I'd like to thank ARUP for inviting the Department of Energy to be part of this activity. And for my presentation, I'll be discussing what are the targets that we set for the country under the Philippine Energy Plan that we recently published, as well as the programs on how we can ensure that these targets will be achieved in the future. Okay, this is just the outline of my presentation. Okay. So let me just focus on the power sector. So in 2021, we can see here that the peak demand of the country reached around 16,000 megawatts, and about 70% of which occurred in Luzon, and the rest shared by Visayas and Mindanao. And the total generation last year stood at 106,000 gigawatt hour. But I'd like to stress here that for the fuels used for the power generation, we are almost 55% import dependent. So meaning we are just providing 45% the local fuels or local energy resources only provided 45% of the total power generation mix in 2021. So going here, the table, you can see here that the coal contributed around 43% of the total installed capacity. However, in terms of power generation, the coal power plants contributed 58% of our total power generation mix. With regard to the share of renewable, we can see here that for the total installed capacity, renewable contributed 29%. However, in terms of generation, these resources, the aggregate contribution was only 22% last year, while the rest contributed by oil and gas. Let me just stress here that gas for the total Philippines is, the gas here is very significant for the Philippines, as the natural gas contributed 18% of the total power generation in the Philippines. But if you're going to look at the Luzon grid, 25% is being contributed by natural gas. Okay, so let me now go to the Philippine Energy Plan. So we prepared two scenarios for this Philippine Energy Plan. One is the reference scenario, and the other one is what we call the clean energy scenario. So under the reference scenario, we already set a higher target for renewable, which is about 35% by 2040. But under the clean energy scenario, we set a much higher target, which is 50% of the total power generation mix. So if you're going to compare the Philippines target with that of the ASEAN member states, we are ahead of them because some of the ASEAN member states, the targets are just for the capacity, share of RE in the capacity, not in the generation mix. Okay. So before I discuss this slide, I think in 2019, no, the Department of Energy issued a coal moratorium for greenfield coal power plants. So meaning there will be no more coal power plants coming in the future, except for those projects considered already committed projects. So meaning the proponents have already invested some money for this project, so we will allow them to continue to construct this additional capacity. So we're talking here of about 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts from coal, but after 2027 or 2028, you can see that there will be no more coal coming in, and then contributing to our generation mix. So meaning there will be no more additional capacity coming in. So given such coal moratorium, so we can see here that in the reference scenario, which is the middle pie chart here, we can see here that the share of coal will be reduced to almost 25% from a high of 57 in 2020 and then 58% in 2021, and it will go down to almost 25% in 2040 under the reference scenario. It will further go down to 23% under the clean energy scenario. But you can see here that the RE share will increase from 35 under the reference to 50% in 2040. But I'd like to point out here the contribution of natural gas. In the reference, we need gas for about 40%. But under the clean energy scenario, because of the entry of more renewable energy, some capacities from gas will also be displaced. So that's why the share of gas will be reduced to almost 27%. However, we need a more flexible plant, so some of the hydro here should be a pump storage hydro type for us to have a flexible capacity, flexible plant to support the entry of more variable RE such as solar and wind. Okay. To be able to achieve that, until 2040, we'll be needing, under the clean energy scenario, around 92 gigawatt of additional capacity. And 80% of which, we're talking of almost 74 gigawatt of capacity will be from renewable energy. And you can see here that the significant contribution will come from solar, wind, and hydro. Okay. So given such target, so we can see that the energy transition here, or the just energy transition to clean energy, so we combine gas, although gas is still a fossil fuel, but it emits lesser GHG compared with other fossil fuels like coal and oil. No? And for the reference scenario, we can see that in 2030, we can achieve a higher share of clean energy, RE plus gas in 2030. But under the clean energy scenario, we can achieve this earlier, around 2027. So what are the plans and programs? So let me now present to you the policies, plans and programs of the Department of Energy with regard to the renewable energy here. So let me just focus on the first two, the Renewable Portfolio Standard and Green Energy Auction Program. So, okay. So to be able to achieve the target of a higher share of renewable energy, we need to increase the RPS requirement. Okay. So just last September, our secretary signed the increase in RPS from 1% to 2.52% to be able for us to reach our target of higher RE share. And if we see in the future that this is still not enough, we can still further increase the RPS to more than 2.5%. Okay. So how do we ensure that there will be available capacities from renewable to be able to meet the RPS? So this is the Green Energy Auction Program. Okay. So just recently, we concluded the first auction last June involving 2,000 megawatts of RE technologies. I think 60% of that 2,000 megawatt is solar. And our success rate was about almost 99%, meaning out of the 2,000 megawatts that we bid out, we were able to close around more than 1,900 megawatts. So these capacities from renewable will be considered committed projects, and we are expecting that these capacities will come in between 2023 to 2025. Okay. So we're looking at whether we need to conduct annual GIAP to ensure that there will be enough capacities from renewable energy. So the others, you can just read here the other plans and programs, even the policies of the department with regard to the renewable energy. Okay. So we do have a national renewable energy program. So this program sets the higher share of renewable energy. And we believe that the significant contribution of renewable energy in our country in terms of ensuring energy security, sustainable development, climate change mitigation, capacity building, and even inclusive growth to address cross-cutting issues on poverty, gender, and even access to basic needs. Okay. So in 2018, we have this project completed, the competitive RE zones, and the results of the study. This is the phase one. The result of the study provided us around 25 or about 25 strategic areas with high concentration of solar and wind. So here, the study estimated the potential for wind around almost 16 gigawatt, and for wind around 18 to 19 gigawatt of wind potential. But I'd like to point here that these areas do not only consider the high concentration, but also there must be an existing transmission network near the area to be able to reduce the cost of putting up this solar and wind. Kasi that's the challenge when we are developing RE, because it's site-specific. And since this is site-specific, sometimes the site is too far from the transmission network. Okay. We also concluded this study by World Bank and I think SMAP. This is the offshore wind potential of the country, and based on the study, the country has around 178 gigawatt of offshore wind potential. And currently, we have issued around 40 service contracts for the offshore wind. And this is our focus right now on how we can develop this. We all know that offshore wind is expensive compared with onshore wind. But we are studying on how to further attract investments to this offshore wind project or potential of the country. Okay. So aside from renewable energy, so we do have Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, which was passed in 2019. And under this act, we have already identified what we call the designated establishments or the mandated establishments. So those, I think, consuming on the average 500,000 kilowatt hour in a year. So you'll be part of that designated establishments. And being part of the designated establishments, you need to comply, you need to come up with your own energy efficiency and conservation plan. And you need to submit data to the Department of Energy for monitoring whether or not the program is effective to reduce the demand for these designated establishments. We even, the good thing about this law is that it also mandates the local government units to formulate their respective energy efficiency and conservation plan. And this plan should be included in their local development plan. And I'm suggesting, because right now we do have a project with USAID helping the LGUs, no, to come up not only to formulate energy efficiency and conservation plan, but also the local energy plan. That should be part of the local development plan. So aside from efficiency, we are also looking at the development of other fuels. So we have the EVIDA law, the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act, which was passed just this year, and when we just issued the implementing rules and regulation, I think September. It was signed by our secretary. So we'll see a greater penetration of EVs in the future because of this law, and we are now preparing the roadmap together with other government agencies, no, like the DOTR and DTI. So aside from the EVs, we are also studying the possibility of developing our hydrogen, be it green or blue hydrogen. When you say blue hydrogen, we can produce hydrogen from gas, but with CCUS. So because gas is still emits GHG, so through the CCS we can capture the carbon. And aside from hydrogen, we are also looking at whether we can also utilize ammonia. So ammonia can be used as co-firing for coal. For, in Japan, it's about 20%. It can go as high as 50% and maybe 100% in the future, ammonia. No? While hydrogen can be a co-firing for natural gas up to 30%. So aside from this, again, the nuclear, so we do have a program, we do have a national policy right now to look at. No? We are just looking at studying whether we are ready and to introduce or reintroduce again nuclear energy. So we are looking at both conventional and the advanced technology. When we talk of advanced technology, we're talking here of small modular reactor, around 50 megawatts to 300 megawatts. There is also what we call micro modular reactor from 10 megawatts to 50 megawatts. So we are both looking at the conventional and then this advanced technology. But again, there is we need to comply with the 19 infrastructure requirements or issues of the International Atomic Energy Agencies. Not unless we satisfy all these 19 infrastructure requirements, so we cannot embark or we cannot put up our own nuclear energy. And very, most importantly, we need to have public acceptance on this. Kung walang public acceptance, I think we cannot go for nuclear. Okay, this is just a scenario in a capsule. So the below text here will provide you the target for the Philippine Energy Plan, and we believe that the key components will help us achieve our objectives on energy security, sustainable energy, resilient infrastructure, competitive energy sector, smart homes and cities, and empowered consumers. So I like to show this graph. No? So I asked the author of this, Dr. Said of the IAEA. No? So there is always a trade-off, according to him, with regard to cost and emissions. No? So as we go to the path of to zero emission, we can see a much higher cost of electricity. And I'd like to note here that this cost includes nuclear. And according to him, if there is no nuclear, it will go up as much as $250 per megawatt hour. So our challenge right now is how do we reduce the cost of the emerging technologies to be able for us to address this increasing costs when as we move towards the net zero scenario here. So as we do have also energy resiliency. In 2018, we do have this policy and then created the task force on energy resiliency. We even improved this policy in 2022, extending it, and we are requiring all energy stakeholders, oil and power, to submit to us the their respective resiliency compliance plan. So we have a program right now. We are developing a roadmap for energy resiliency to include standards and even up to financing of infrastructure. So to conclude, I'd like to note here that as we move towards energy transition, net zero, I think we need to embrace a system thinking approach, meaning it should be interdisciplinary, intersectoral, cross-sectoral, and even to involve the local government units as our partners for the implementation of the different energy programs and projects of the country. So with that, I end my presentation, and good morning to everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Can you guys see dollar signs in my eyes? I can see so much opportunity in the energy sector. And yeah, as you know, as a energy leader for the Philippines, I can hear opportunities and see a lot of work for us in the next decade or so. Thank you, Michael. Finally, our last speaker for the day comes from one of the largest energy companies in the Philippines that aims to help build a world where there is energy abundance, zero poverty, and an environmentally sustainable society apart from the revolutionizing energy systems. Our next presenter has been in the renewable energy industry for at least 15 years, covering strategy formulation, regulatory and compliance, and project development. He is currently the Vice President for Renewable Energy Project Development under Aboitiz Renewable Inc., managing and developing of solar, wind, and hydropower projects. Let's welcome Mr. Rolando Rolly Vergara Jr.
Okay, good day everyone. I am Rolando Vergara Jr. or Rolly for short, and as Lynn mentioned, I am currently managing the development efforts for solar, wind, and hydro for projects under Aboitiz Renewables Inc. or ARI. So in behalf of ARI, I would like to thank ARU for inviting us to this important event. Okay, in Aboitiz Power, we have a vision of a better future, wherein we consider it our responsibility to provide reliable and ample power supply when needed, to ensure that the supply of electricity is provided at a reasonable and competitive price, and lastly, to accomplish the first two duties which I've mentioned, with the least possible adverse effects on our environment and communities. As our mission, we believe that available, reliable, and affordable electricity is the lifeblood of our country, fueling both the economy and individual opportunity. So with our mission and vision in mind, we recognize that decarbonization of the energy sector is necessary. However, it is also a major challenge. While many of the technologies for cleaner and zero emissions energy are currently available, much remains to be done in terms of their commercial viability, technical feasibility, and regulatory frameworks to support this movement, especially in a developing country like ours, with legacy power systems and growing energy demand. We are committed to supporting the growth of RE in the Philippines, but it has to be in step with economic development, ensuring that our energy supply remains reliable, affordable, and environmentally sustainable. We are excited, but at the same time cognizant of the risks and challenges associated with growing renewable energy. The market is a fast-moving industry that is very competitive and ever-changing. It is very apparent that the RE market will continue to evolve rapidly, which will provide many opportunities to grow our portfolio of renewable energy projects. In order to remain not only competitive, but to sustain our position as the leader in the RE space in the Philippines, we need to have a diversified portfolio inclusive of multiple technologies and new innovations. We do keep a close eye on the development and progress seen from our competitors to be fully aware of the market and our competition, which provides us insights on where we can be most successful with our project developments and execution, and that our competitors, whether large or small, have recently been placing a lot of emphasis on solar and energy storage project development. We are also developing a significant pipeline of solar projects, but we are likewise seeking to develop floating solar, onshore wind, perhaps offshore wind, and also international expansion. We seek to always be competitive through the reduction of capital expenditures, optimization of operations and maintenance, establishing direct supply relationships with key manufacturers, consultants such as Arup, partnering with reliable EPC companies that work with us to reduce overall cost. So through this, our goal is to increase our total attributable net sellable capacity from the current 928 megawatts to about 4.6 gigawatts by 2030. It's an almost five-fold increase with the possibility of growing beyond 4.6 gigawatts if the acceleration of the RE market creates additional power demand. Now, all these activities are part of our growth strategy to achieve our ambition of reaching a total RE portfolio of 4.6 gigawatts or more by 2030. This in turn balances our generating portfolio between our thermal and RE assets. While we feel this to be an ambitious target, we likewise see this as an opportunity and commitment to be part of the country's energy transition goals. Our portfolio in pipeline consists of a mix of renewable energy technologies with emphasis on ensuring a strong diversification. A diverse portfolio, which we are targeting, brings with it all the unique capabilities of each renewable energy source. So as one of the first steps for this journey, we are currently constructing the 75 megawatt Kayanga Solar in Bugalyon, Pangasinan, and it is now months away in reaching completion in commercial operations. Arup is very much familiar with this project. Not only this project, we are also deep into the construction of the 130 megawatt Lawag Solar, also in Pangasinan, with the target commercial operations by second half of next year. So while we have about 200 megawatts of RE to be commissioned next year, about 400 megawatts of additional projects are likewise targeted to start construction next year. Now, while the appetite is there, we recognize that the journey will never be without its challenges. Just early this year, we have seen the disruption of the international supply chain, economic turmoil, and after effects of the pandemic, among others, which became a confluence of factors that have resulted in an economic environment wherein new investments, like RE, proved to be a challenge. As to when would these factors taper down would be anyone's guess at this point. While we are more cautious in our steps under this environment, we remain committed in our goals to our energy transition. Closer to home, permitting for the project remains to be a perennial challenge. While we recognize efforts from the industry regulators such as the Department of Energy to streamline permitting through the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop or EVOS, permitting prerequisites and their securing of such at the local and national levels remain to be a challenge. Based on experience, we need about 3.5 years from project origination all the way to start of construction, and this is driven mainly by permitting. Nevertheless, we are now seeing a more profound clamor for RE in the country, and it will be supported by the policies shared by the good director, Michael Sino Cruz. And it will be a matter of time for all stakeholders and participants to get our acts together and rally behind this very important goal. And this is a goal we have full intention to rally behind as well. Over the next 10 years, we will play a key role in this energy transition and decarbonization journey. Since 2021, we have developed a 3 gigawatt pipeline of projects composed of solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal. And these projects, which are strategically located across the Philippines, are now in various stages of development and execution. Two of which I showed a while ago, Arup is very familiar with. So while the path to decarbonization is by no means a simple path, we come into this journey with a serious and sincere intent to be part of something bigger than all of us here, and with a success story that Aboitiz looks forward to in 2030 and beyond. As Paulo Colle said, skill comes with the journey through roads that are filled with exciting challenges. It is with this thought that I close with a flavor of what we are about as in terms of a company. Aboitiz Power, through its renewable energy arm, ARI, or Aboitiz Renewables Inc., is constantly growing and expanding. We are well positioned to be part of the country's energy transition through the synergies with our portfolio and people, as well as leverage the strength that comes from the overall scale, reach, and diversity of the Aboitiz Group. Having said that, we sincerely acknowledge the partnership we have forged with Arup, and we look forward to more opportunities working with you in the future. Thank you, and a good day to all of you.
Thank you, Rolly. That was a very insightful presentation. And yes, I'm looking forward to more opportunities working with you in the future. With that, I would like to once again call on our speakers, Director Sino Cruz and Cheng, to please join me in front for the panel discussion. Mark, Peter, and Rolly will be joining us online as well. Hello again, everyone. I am so fortunate to be sitting right beside the Department of Energy Director, Mr. Sino Cruz. If I can, I'd like to monopolize the question and answer, but I can't. So, yeah. So, could you, just for a recap, could you give me like a takeaway from this morning's session that you would like to expound on or explore more for our guests to start, raising questions?
Okay. Well, the current situation right now, we see a higher prices of fossil fuels. So these higher prices would be an incentive for us to go more renewables. Yeah. So that for me is that should push us further and accelerate our efforts towards the development of renewable as well as other emerging clean energy technologies.
Yes. Cheng, you have something you would like to share?
Yeah, actually, we're really glad that DOE presented their existing programs on RE in promoting renewable energy because, as we know, the Renewable Energy Act has been there since 2008. And we're seeing a lot of developments in terms of releasing the memorandum for the GEAP, the auction program, and the option program. And of course, in streamlining the processes for other RE developers, RE small energy players to have a part in the discussion on energy transition. And now that, because this is a COP27 event, it's also good to situate where we at the COP27 discussion from Glasgow last year on COP26 now in Egypt. I think it's important that we also recognize the state of energy and climate financing in the Global South, especially in Asia. Recently, Oxfam has released a report on climate finance in Asia, and it's good that we're seeing a lot of efforts in most of the financing is going through climate mitigation in Asia, but we also have to look at where it's going because right now I think Philippines gets it's top 5 in Asia receiving most of the climate finances from international development banks. But we must be critical what portion is going through climate mitigation, what portion goes through adaptation. And I think we also have to mention that in energy resilience, and especially in the context of the Philippines, we must put equal efforts in advancing adaptation with, of course, co-benefits to mitigation and, of course, mitigation in the context of modernizing our grid, in promoting more energy resilient Philippines. So, yeah.
Thank you, Cheng. We pause from our panel for now. I'd like to know if we've got questions from our audience. Any questions? Okay, as they're still preparing, I'll continue on with takeaways from our online speakers. I'll start with you, Rolly, and put the other two, our directors, last.
Yeah, I found the presentation of Director Michael very insightful and very encouraging, but also very challenging because such an aggressive aspiration for the Philippines would also entail a lot of challenges. Land availability, for example, for solar. As we all know, probably 70 to 80% of the growth aspiration will be composed of solar. If in case we don't see a conducive environment for offshore wind. But there's also optimism for offshore wind, which we're keen to look at. Now, going back to those policies, we do recognize certain challenges related to, apart from land availability, grid connection point availability as well. If the grid development can be in step with the growth for renewable energy capacities and demand related to that, that is something that we all look forward to.
Okay, I think we have someone on the floor who would like to ask a question.
Hi, I'm from Arup. I'm Jay from Energy Team. My question is for Mr. Cheng. So what do you think is the most challenging when dealing with local stakeholders when trying to encourage them to transition to energy, sustainable energy in their communities?
Yeah, actually, in the context of small islands, we didn't have that much problem introducing renewable energy technologies to them. Because as I've mentioned, the concept of solar-powered technology is not alien to them because they've been using portable devices which are solar-powered. But I think in the broader context is more on the what challenges we have with the small energy players in the local communities, especially electric cooperatives, is to, because it also involves changing their ways of working in terms of modernizing or adding RE in their generation mix as an electric cooperative. It's a challenge for them to drastically, transition to that path. But I think there are welcome developments, especially with the energy programs we had from the Department of Energy and the policies that were continually update and provide for these energy players to have more opportunities in leveling the playing field in terms of achieving energy resilience. So I think that's more of where the challenge lies in especially in modernizing our grid, because in promoting the centralized energy system, I think that's not really a problem, but more on with the small and big energy players on how they could transition to more sustainable and energy resilient, more sustainable and resilient energy systems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, we have another question.
Hi, I'm Paul from Building Services in Arup. So my question is for Mr. Rolly Vergara. So what are the challenges that you have to overcome? What are the challenges that Aboitiz had to overcome or is overcoming in creating new products or plans for cleaner, more sustainable?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I speak for utility scale renewable energy development. The challenges that we're still navigating today, I mentioned a while ago, would be grid connection availability. There's a challenge to secure viable connection points to the grid. There's obviously a disconnect between the timing of project entries, not only for OEs but other developers as well, versus the point in time where the grid is actually ready to take in this new renewable energy capacities. As one. Second would be permitting, which I shared a while ago. We have a very complex permitting environment in the Philippines. Certain objectives on permitting tend to vary between major government agencies like DENR, Department of Agrarian Reform, BIR to a certain extent, and the private sector is left to figure out how to harmonize all of these permitting challenges and to bridge them in order to bring the projects forward. An overarching challenge that we're presented today would really be the macroeconomics. Obviously, foreign exchange doesn't look good right now. Interest rates, inflation, all of them affect cost of capital for us to be able to put forward a viable investment. We have, obviously, as part of the private sector, when we invest on renewable energy, the investment has to make sense. And we're very cautious at this point, but we do hope everything starts to normalize, at least pre-pandemic, maybe 2-3 years from now, depending on who you talk to regarding that. So those are the challenges I would share at this point, immediate, but also ongoing challenges.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Paul. Next one.
Hi, good morning. My name is Abby from Energy Team. My question is for Peter. Hi, Peter. As an Arup staff, what would you advise we do more of to incorporate resiliency into the projects we undertake?
Okay, yeah, thanks very much for that. I mean, I'd just like to start by saying that I was very impressed by what Michael was saying for the plans for the Philippines. It's really important, I think, that even though the Philippines has a very diverse energy mix already, there is this other pressure, which is to move towards a more decarbonized society, and therefore I was encouraged to see some of the plans that are in place to move forward in introducing things like offshore wind, modular reactors for nuclear. These are all really good things that we would support. We think it's the right direction to go in, but it's not just about the fuel mix, it's about the resilience of the infrastructure. Obviously, the Philippines has quite a number of sort of natural phenomena, things like typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanoes and the like. So really, that comes into the planning of infrastructure. You need to make sure that the infrastructure is sort of safeguarded against those types of natural phenomena. And we're seeing more and more of them as well over time. So we need to be mindful of that when we do plan the works and ensure that that resilience is built into it. And also the other point as well is, building renewables into the system is great, and it's something that we would all encourage. It has become cheap enough now that it competes with coal. The downside of renewables is the intermittent supply, which you need to moderate. You obviously need to make sure that the supply is constant, and with that we would think about implementing more energy storage systems, so batteries, the pump storage and the like. And ultimately, the way I see the world going at the moment, I'm a great fan of the hydrogen economy. I can see that's really the sort of ultimate end game for most of us in order to achieve our sort of carbon targets. So it's something that I would encourage the Philippines also to look at. It does work hand in hand with many of the technologies that you're already using and with technologies that you're proposing to bring in, particularly nuclear and offshore wind, and is something that I think would go a long way in meeting those carbon reduction targets.
Thank you, Peter. I think we look forward to hydrogen technology in the future. Thank you.
I need to add something.
Okay. I think Michael has a question.
Because your question is,
Abby?
Do we need to integrate resiliency? That's your question, right?
Yes.
I think you need to, because we do have a policy right now, as I presented earlier. All energy stakeholders, oil and power, the DUs, they need to submit to us the resiliency compliance plan. So therefore, resiliency should be integrated already. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Michael. I'll pause for the questions on the floor. I do have an online question from Ms. Mavic Conde, an environmental reporter who is currently writing a piece about energy transition in the transport sector. And her question is, where does the electrification of road-based public vehicles fits in our goal, in the energy resilience goal? I think that would be better answered by Michael.
Okay, thank you. I was not able to present here the final energy consumption of the Philippines. But if you're going to look at the final energy consumption of the Philippines, in 2021, we are 50% dependent on oil. And about 70 to 80% of oil used for transport. Okay. So we are fortunate that we do have now a law, the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act. And under this law, we're going to set a higher target, maybe more than 10% penetration of electric vehicle in our road transport. We are just currently drafting, formulating in consultation and in partnership, collaboration with other agencies and even other stakeholders, the formulation of the roadmap for electric vehicle. And currently, there's a meeting right now in BOI discussing the tariff for the parts and components and even the CBU, the completely built unit, with regard to the electric vehicle industry. And we need to develop our own local manufacturing here. That is the most important thing. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I can add on EV, in transitioning to, because that also falls under bigger movement on just transition, especially on the transport and mobility sector, is we have to make sure, because when the news strike before about the modernizing of jeepneys in the Philippines, of course, it received a lot of backlash. And I think with the existing law right now, we have to make sure that social justice is at the heart of the transition, specifically the transport sector in the Philippines. It has a very complex structure. We have to make sure we talk to the commuters. We have to talk to the developers. We have to talk to the transport groups and such. So it has to be holistic, and it has to be, the transition plan must be clear, and it involves the right people, the right group, the right institutions in the process. So I think that's where it lies, specifically on transport transition. So yeah.
Thank you, Cheng. Another question from online. What is the Philippines' role in the region, meaning Asia, given the widespread opportunities for renewable energy in the country? Anyone, I think, who has a view can answer. So I'll just repeat the question. What is the Philippines' role in region given the widespread opportunity for renewable energy in country?
If I may?
Sure.
Okay. So compared with other Asian countries, I think we are ahead in terms of policies. And the Philippines is being recognized as a model in terms of RE policies. So we have implemented here both the FIT, the RPS, and we do have several programs. So we are right now implementing the whole of policy mechanisms for renewable energy to be able to fast track the development of renewable energy. And if you're going to look at, you can visit the ASEAN Center for Energy, you can look at the targets of other ASEAN member states. We are ahead of them, meaning we have more ambitious targets compared with our ASEAN neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone from online? Mark, would you like to give your view?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what Director Sano Cruz has said is true. You know, the Philippines has got a lot of opportunity for renewable energy because of the wind, you know, the location, the geothermal, hydro. So it's I think it's setting the example to the region to continue to develop the renewable energy. And I think the targets that have been put forward by Director Sano Cruz, the Department of Energy, as well as Aboitiz, you know, they're pushing forward for this transformational change in the way that we generate and we you know, deliver on renewable energy and the commitments back to the SDGs and to you know, UN Charter. So I think the Philippines is really focusing at doing that, and there's lots of opportunities in the Philippines for renewable energy. Going back to some of the questions before about resilience, you know, obviously risk of the networks and actually making sure that there's enough land provision, and as Rolly's mentioned about the bureaucracy, trying to get that better managed and better in place to deliver on these commitments is one of the keys. And I'm sure you know, the Department of Energy is looking at how we can try to improve that. So I see a bright future, you know, for the Philippines, to be honest, and I think they're very well placed in doing that. And even some aspects of tidal energy as well. You know, there's still good opportunities with the islands and some of those other sources as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I guess we don't have a lot more time, but we can entertain the last two questions. We'll get one from the audience.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gab from the Water Team, and my question is for Director Sino Cruz. Do you think that the current government will have clean energy transitions as part of their priorities for the coming 6 years? And if that's the case, how do you think they will push through with the implementation?
So with the current administration, okay. So actually, there are no changes when it comes to the policies of the Department of Energy, even for this administration. So the renewable, the development of other emerging, even nuclear, that we will continue up to for this administration. So we have embraced, adopted all of these policies and programs now in place, and then we'll look at whether we can adapt these emerging technologies. But the challenge is whether these technologies will be cost competitive. So hopefully, just like the renewable energy before when we talk of solar and wind, they were very expensive before. But right now, they are more affordable than the fossil fuel. Similarly, this will also happen to these emerging technologies. Right now, they are expensive, but later on, they will be more affordable for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last question from the floor.
Hello. I think this question is for Director Sano Cruz. We acknowledge the very critical role of the grid and the DUs for the programs that you have discussed earlier. And we would just like to know what is the current situation, if the grid and if the utilities are prepared for these targets. And aside from the resiliency plan that they should submit to you, do they have other programs or initiatives that is aligned with the targets that you have mentioned? Thank you.
So when it comes to the transmission, distribution, so we do have distribution development plan, we do have transmission development plan. All these plans are incorporated in the Philippine Energy Plan. So we heard before from Aboitiz that one of the challenges is the availability of transmission network. Yes, because we do have encountered several issues, specifically right-of-way issue. Malaking problema talaga sa Pilipinas yun when it comes to right-of-way issue. So, we are ensuring that the distribution development plan, the transmission development plan, are all anchored on the targets, policies of the Department of Energy, which should be part of the Philippine Energy Plan. And with regard to resiliency, so as I mentioned earlier, we are requiring all energy stakeholders, specifically oil industry, power industry, to submit to us the resiliency compliance plan. We already reviewed all of them, and then we're going to come up with a template for such plan. We're going to have a scorecard as well as standards to be set and to help them and even facilitate how to get investment for this resilience infrastructure. Ganun po yan. So it's a long, right now, maybe initial stage pa kami. We just completed the review. We're talking of plenty RCPs that we received. And then we reviewed all of them and then come up with a good template and then standards and then scorecards and even investment. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got one last online question prior to closing and asking my Mr. Universe question for everyone. For adopting the sort of NEC code in the RTS, the shutdown procedures, what's your view on adapting that in the Philippines? The RTS. Yes, sir. I lost the question in the chat. I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, so because we lost the chat, I'm going to ask my Mr. Universe question to everyone. This is going to be the last. If there are questions that has not been raised, we will answer. We will try to answer them via email or online. Okay, for everyone, if you could share one key message to the world leaders attending COP27 in Egypt, what would it be? Let's probably start with Peter.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to sound, I think, a bit like Greta Thunberg with my question, but essentially my message would be for the group, for the leaders of the world to really wake up and act, to really not make any more excuses. I was a bit disappointed by the outcome from COP26. There was a lot of talk about what people are going to do, how we're going to solve the problems, but at the final sort of reckoning, you know, at the end of the conference, some of the commitments were quite poor. So really, you know, I think it's the time for us to act now. You can see what's happening outside your window. You can see it on the news every day. You can see how climate change is going to affect us all. There are disasters happening in many countries on a sort of weekly or daily basis. And also that there's the issue of decarbonisation. You know, we've already gone past the point of no return. It's going to take decades, if not centuries, to remove the carbon from the atmosphere that we have already. So really, you know, it's time to act. It's going to be painful, but we need to share in this pain, and we all need to make commitments and stick to them.
Thank you, Peter. Mark?
Well, you know, the last 2 years has seen a global crisis already, right? And I'm really quite impressed with COVID, the way that scientists, governments has all mobilized to solve the problem, to be honest. But this is a similar problem, you know, the climate crisis that we've got is a similar problem. And I would try to encourage those world leaders to say, take the commitment the same that was made to COVID and do the same thing for climate change. You know, take the resources, take the initiatives that we've made to solve COVID and apply it to the climate change problems in the same way. That's what I would try to do, because there's a lot of smart, good people out there, governments, developers, scientists, engineers, I'm sure we can solve this much more quickly than we have been doing.
Thank you, Mark. Rolly?
Yeah, I give this statement not as an Avoidis employee, but as a human being. While we are doing our part on the climate resilience effort, we remain vulnerable as a country to the adverse effects of climate change. So having said that, we call on all stakeholders around the world to, seriously work together in order to make decarbonization a reality not only for us, but also for future generations as well.
Thank you, Rolly. How about Chang?
Finally, I get to use my notes now. Since we sent our position paper to the Philippine delegation to the COP27, and I'll read out our 4 key asks for world leaders and national leaders for COP27. The richest countries and people and the corporate world hold most responsibility and must be held accountable for the climate crisis. And we ask them to enforce, accountability on climate and their climate commitments to ensure that we made this far and increase ambitions from those actors. And governments must also deliver their climate plans that address the needs of communities impacted by the climate crisis. And as we say at Oxfam, there is no climate justice without gender justice, and ensure prioritization of all women, girls, LGBTQIA+ community, and most marginalized in the programs and policies of the government. And lastly, communities impacted by the climate crisis should be part of the agenda setting at the negotiations at COP27. So I think that's the gist, but I can send the position paper if you want to read the whole statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, but certainly not the least.
Okay. Thank you. I think the commitments made by the developed countries should be put forward, specifically on the loss and damage, the Article 8. So we're talking here of climate justice. Developing countries are most affected by this climate crisis. And until now, there's no concrete decision yet with regard to Article 8 on the loss and damage. And there was a petition made by Vanuatu that climate change should be considered as a human rights violation. So, and many Pacific islands supported such move by the Vanuatu. I don't know, it's a long process. They need to go to the International Court of Justice to be able for the climate crisis to be declared as part of the human rights. But I'd like to note here that to address climate crisis is not only a whole of government approach. It should be a whole of society approach. It's not only the government, but us. We need to have, as I mentioned earlier, we need to have a system thinking approach to be able to address this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. That was a very thought-provoking discussion and messages. Thank you, everyone, for your active participation. May I ask you to go back to your seats now? Okay, and to close this event, may we call on stage a member of the East Asia Region Board and Southeast Asia Executive. He is the geographic leader responsible in managing the Arab business in the Philippines. Let's all please welcome Arab Manila's Managing Director, Mr. Raul Manlapig.
Thanks, Lynn. Good morning. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for your presence. I would also like to thank the Deputy Head of the mission for the British Embassy, Mr. Alistair White. Unfortunately, he had to go because of a previous commitment. But thank you for joining in concluding this week-long Arab conference. The British Embassy has always been very supportive of what we're trying to do here in the Philippines and Arab's initiatives, and we're actually always looking forward to achieving the goals of resilience together with the British Embassy. Also, our sincere thanks to our speakers, Peter Thompson, our energy leader from out of Hong Kong, Mark, also in Hong Kong, Mr. Cheng Pagulayan from Oxfam, thank you. Director Michael Sino Cruz of the Department of Energy, thank you very much, and Mr. Rolando Vergara of Aboitiz Power Corporation, Power Group. Thank you for sharing your expertise in answering today's topic on how do we ensure energy resilience for the economies of the future. I think this Race to Resilience series has been very fruitful. It spanned from Hong Kong this week to Vietnam, to Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and the Philippines. This has been, going on in the hopes of creating more awareness and to bring meaningful discussions in addressing this global challenge. Climate change is happening more rapidly now than ever before, and everybody's saying we must act now. I think, from what I gathered today, 1.5 degrees is the target. We need to do things 6 times faster. We need to do 80% of what we need to do this decade. Renewables being the fastest route is the way to go. It obviously cuts cost of living, but the big problem is that we must move away from coal by 2024, and that's just 2 years away. And it's almost near to impossible, but the action needs to be done. And Peter Thompson described about the qualities of resilient systems because we obviously need to have resilient energy systems to be able to support growing economies. But just energy transition is also an equally important issue. And the work that Oxfam has been doing with regards to, putting up reliable or resilient energy systems in small communities is also commendable. From developing and implementing energy resilience frameworks to enabling small and large communities to transition towards clean energy is the challenge that we are all faced with. I think we are equally impressed with what the Department of Energy has presented to us with regards to their plans and the challenges that they're faced with. Right now, our dependence on coal is just too high at 58%, and the target for a clean energy scenario of 50% renewable energy by 2040 is very challenging, but I think is achievable. Obviously, the competitive renewable energy zone that has been identified by the Department of Energy gives a lot of opportunity for the private sector to invest in renewable energy. And I think the challenge would be for the Philippine government to make that market competitive and to encourage the private sector to invest in renewable energy. Kudos obviously to Aboitiz for the commendable vision that they have of investing in renewable energy, and we hope to see a lot more companies in the future investing in renewable energy. Each organization across the energy chain, from the supply side, the demand side, and the transmission side, differ. And obviously, there will be a need to have trade-offs between having affordable and clean energy and implementing climate action. We hope today's discussion has shed some light in understanding the impact of climate events to our energy systems. I think better information on how to apply energy resilience for future scenarios will help in planning and creating a more energy resilient world for years to come. There's a lot of work that we need to do, intersectoral, interdisciplinary work, like what Director Michael has said a while ago, that needs to be done to understand how climate change impacts our energy systems. This will require us to work hand in hand across the chain to develop more systematic and harmonized assessment approach. We at ARUP will remain committed to helping achieve energy resilience And our work will continue to be, trying to bring the innovation that we can bring from outside into the Philippines to help the industry. With this, I would like to thank you all very much for attending the event, and we hope to see you again in our future events. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Raul. And once again, I'd like to thank all our speakers, our guests, and attendees at the Arab COP27 Race to Resilience Asia Series. We make a resilient world with every event that creates and spreads awareness. We'd like to mention special thanks to our sponsors, British Embassy Manila, Philippine Green Building Council, Greenergy Solutions, Oscar M. Lopez Center, and National Center for Transportation Studies. Once again, my name is Lindy Mayuga, and I wish you all a great day ahead. We did prepare something for all our guests on site. Please help yourselves in our buffet and also stay for some socials. Thank you.